Hello and welcome to the Hive community made up of dynamic educators. I am so excited that you are choosing to join us in the Hive and journey with us to make positive and impactful change in our classrooms as well as our community. I'm your host, Michael Matera. I am a teacher, I am an author, I am a speaker, and I happen to also be the host of Hive Summit, which is a huge honor, and I'm so excited to have us all buzzing around here in the Hive. Today's speaker, I super jazzed to announce. Today's speaker is a lifelong learner. He has a bachelor's in elementary ed, a master's in education in instructional technology, and is currently pursuing his doctoral degree in organizational leadership. He not only is a lifelong learner, but he wants us to be one too. He helps build bridges of understanding towards topics such as project-based learning as well as problem-based learning, the student-driven classroom, as well as celebrating diversity and building community in our classroom. He continues to share out his ideas with all of us, from being co-moderator to the Florida Ed Chat, to his book, Journey in the Why in You, and most recent published work titled Diversity, It's Not Just About You, It's About Us. Together, we're better. His passion to share continues to be in the right place. He wants our schools, our classrooms, and our hearts to be the best they can for everyone. Truly, everyone, from our own hearts to those hearts of our students. I couldn't be more happy to introduce to the Hive Summit community, Dene Gainey. Welcome, Dene.
And hello, and thank you so much for that warm welcome, Michael.
No problem. Dene and I have met really during this whole COVID time. Melody, part of EduMatch, to sort of put out a little Zoom meeting for us to sort of meet in, and I super enjoyed learning from and listening and just having some fun with Dene. And I was so excited when Dene said he would be willing to be on the Hive Summit this year. So thank you again, Dene.
Absolutely.
So Dene, for those of us that don't know about your book, those of us that are just hearing about it, I want to know, one, do you have a copy right there?
Well, lo and behold, I do.
He does. So for those of you out there looking at this book and wondering I love this idea of the power of you, right? But can you share with everybody else kind of the idea behind the book?
So I have to admit that when I first started on this journey to the why in you, I didn't know that it was going to be a book. I was really pouring out my heart in blog form, and by nature of a conversation, here we are today, the result of a conversation that we had about putting it out so that maybe other people can read it. And so I think that one of the greatest things that one could ever do in life is understand who they really are. Once you know who you really are as a person, you are unstoppable. And so this particular book identifies the journey that an individual goes through. It doesn't matter whether you are a teacher or in any other discipline, really. It's the idea that the experiences that one has, the obstacles that one goes through and hopefully endures and overcomes are indicative, right? Are indicative of who you are. The obstacles that I went through yesterday showed me something about myself. The challenges I had last year identified something about myself. And so when I lean into those obstacles, when I lean into those challenges and those things that occur in my very own life, even past experiences, things that are going to happen tomorrow, I understand a little bit more about who I am, specifically why I am who I am. And so that's kind of the I would say synopsis of Journey to the Why in You. There are some anecdotal stories in there about things that I've had to go through in my own life and realizations that I've had in the middle of those obstacles. And so there is no power greater than knowing who you are. So the power of you, it's a journey.
I mean, I really, that resonates with me. I mean, as when I went to college, I was a philosophy major, and one of the things we talk about is that we are really the sum total of our histories. Like we're the moment we are living in, the time we're living in, for our own mental capacities, is really just the sum total of those experiences, the things that have happened to us, and you can choose. You can be the determiner of what you do with that information, and that can empower you, that can embolden you. You can learn from those experiences, or the sort of the unexamined life, right? To quote a very famous philosopher, the unexamined life is not worth living, right? It's growing from those experiences that are going to launch you and propel you into something sort of better and prepare you for the things that come forward.
That's exactly right, Michael. And so one of the things that I talk about inside of the cover is the idea that I can look at that obstacle and I can say, I didn't like dealing with that. That was a horrible experience. Um, I really wish that hadn't happened to me. Or I can look at that obstacle or that challenge or that even the good thing and say, wow, if I hadn't experienced that, then I wouldn't know what I know now. Or maybe I wouldn't be who I am right now if I hadn't actually taken the time to reflect on an experience and think about how that experience really showed me um, who I really am.
No, I mean, being open to reflecting, to like think over what has happened is so powerful. I remember when I was first teaching, right? Like when it was my year one, you're just trying to survive. Like, and I'll be honest, I didn't reflect a whole lot over that until I met a parent of one of the students was a teacher in the same district. And every day when she would meet her child, they'd pick her up, right? And we would sort of stand up, like anytime I had like bus duty or car duty or whatever, and I was outside and chatting with her, she would ask, like, how did my day go? What did I try new today? And I didn't even know it at the time, but it wasn't until like the fourth quarter and like the year ended, it was like the things that I continued to hone in on were the things that I shared with this woman. I mean, it was the things that I talked about. It was the things that I noticed this worked well or I didn't like this. And those are the things I either pruned out or doubled down on.
Hmm. The power of reflection. I can't tell you from the very first day I started teaching that I reflected. Somewhere along the line, I realized that thinking back to what happened and what worked, what didn't work, what went well, what didn't go well, and how that informed what I did the next day, like how I used that information to gauge, well, that didn't work, so let me go this different route the next day. And so that reflective process has become such a habit. And I know that it's not so much in the learning, but the reflecting on the learning that really cements those ideas in my head. So yes, I learned something, but when I actually take the time to think about that learning after the fact, then it becomes a whole nother power, right? A whole nother opportunity for me to use that moving forward.
Yeah, I think to kind of echo that same thing for all of you educators out there that are thinking through your experiences in the past, thinking through how you're going to build your classroom in the future, you know, make sure you take that time. I mean, one of the things I absolutely love about teaching is that we do automatically built into our job is the iterative process. We're for sure going to teach year over year, but then even within your own classroom, if you set up a system, you have the opportunity to tweak that system, try that system this week, next week, the following week, this quarter, next quarter, this year, next year. So it's worth the reflection time.
I couldn't agree more.
So I mean, like, I know, so that's a good like synopsis of the book. What's I mean, I think that's hitting upon the importance of understanding you, right?
Absolutely. And so it's important to know you because, to be honest with you, you can't be anybody else other than you. And so you might as well be the best version of yourself.
I love
And
it.
so, yeah. And so I feel so energized when I understand that nobody can do what I do the way that I do it. And perhaps on the other side of that, there are people that I am able to reach because I am being the authentic version of myself. And so it's so important. It's so important to know who you are, and that journey to who you are is even more important because you are always becoming, and along the way you're learning how those different experiences that you've had really show you that version of yourself, or show you who you are, so that you can continue to develop that person.
I like that we're always in becoming state, right? Like you're constantly growing, constantly evolving. That's awesome. So, as teachers look to their year, right? As we all do, it's summer, or for some of you in the United States here have started your year. Some of you around the globe are in the middle of your year. Uh, what's something that we could take and think through in terms of designing our classrooms, designing a lesson? What are some core principles that you have?
Well, speaking about the journey to the Y and U, there's a quote that comes to mind when I think about journey to the Y and U, and that quote says, "You are the only you that will ever be. Your experiences, your story, your diversity." Okay, and I just want to repeat it because there's so much packed inside of there that I think is important to understand. You are the only you that will ever be. Your experiences, your story, your diversity. And so I just want to identify first that it's important to not underestimate your experiences. I think as a teacher, we need to have experiences. And maybe those experiences come by way of traveling. Maybe those experiences might be teaching various grade levels. Maybe those experiences are being in different diverse schools, and having different types of students that we're able to reach. But those experiences are hugely important because those experiences are added to our toolbox. We take those experiences and what went well, what didn't go well, and we bring those with us. And so your experiences, your story, okay? How did you become a teacher? Why did you become a teacher? What has been your experience as a teacher? Your story, what's behind what you do? Your why. And then your diversity. And so I'd like to talk about diversity a little bit right there, just really quickly, because I feel that I am more than just the color of my skin. The color of my skin matters. Make no mistake, the color of my skin matters because it's reflective of history. It's reflective of a long line of things that have transpired historically. However, because of the color of my skin, there are so many different aspects of diversity that I believe go ignored. My perspective might be a little different than the next person's because of the color of my skin, or because of my experiences, or because of the rationale for why I teach every day, why I go into that classroom excited about what I do. So your diversity is not limited to your skin color. It's not limited to your gender. It's more your ideas, your perspectives, your experiences are diverse. And so because of the fact that you are the only one that is collectively you, there's power in that. There's a certain power that comes when you bring the authentic version of you with you every day into the classroom. And so I want to say that diversity, celebrating it, leaning into it, is not truly diversity unless we realize who we are. So, Michael, you realize who you are. I realize who I am. And when you bring those two people together that realize who they are, then you have the power of diversity, the true power of diversity, because you are solid. You are confident in you. I am confident in me. And that confidence, when it comes together, understands that there are benefits to coming together. There are takeaways. There are things that you're going to say that have value that I'm going to be able to receive. And there might be things that I say that have value that you're going to be able to receive. And we become better together because we are able to understand the authentic you and celebrate diversity.
I mean, I absolutely love so much. I mean, to unpack a little bit of what you said there, I mean, such a powerful thing to say that authenticity, right? Like the fact that I am going to show up as me and be comfortable, be vulnerable in that space, But just as I want people to accept who I am, I then also have to come to that space with an open-mindedness that everyone else is going to show up with that same vulnerability of who they are. But then the real work of whatever you're there to do can happen in a more pure sense because we're being who we are supposed to be, who we are called to be, who we want to be. That's powerful.
Absolutely. I mean, I love nature, Michael, and I think about nature all the time and the diversity in nature. I think about how the frogs, they croak, they make a certain sound, but then the bird sings, and so there's a purpose for the croak, there's a purpose for the bird's song. I think about how some trees stand very tall, and then there are some that are very low to the ground, and so I think about those things, and I understand that every one of those creatures, every one of those forms of plant life have a specific role. They have a specific purpose, and together, you don't hear the frog saying, "Oh, I wish I could sing like that bird," or you don't hear the bird saying, "Wow, that frog really has a nice little croak." You don't hear that. Right? You understand that that bird knows its job. That bird knows what it's supposed to be doing, and it is confident. And even in itself, so much that it can share that song with everybody else and say, "Hey, here I am. I am authentically me, and I'm happy about that." And so when that power comes together, you have this natural world, right? That is diverse, that can accomplish its task, its purpose, its role in the earth because they understand who they are.
I absolutely love that analogy, and I think about how a lot of innovations have come from studying nature and seeing patterns in nature, seeing like I think of like Velcro coming from the birds or whatever, right? And then I love your point, like I don't think a bird is self-conscious. Like my tweeting's not as good as that bird's tweeting. Like they just are who they are. They show up and like I'm a bird and I tweet. Like that's what I do. And they're not like I don't think they're comparing each other in terms of flight, right? They're just present. And as we know too, as adults, we sometimes struggle with being in the moment, being present. And I think that has something to do with also not being who we are in that moment because we're thinking about other moments. And then you mentioned confidence. I mean, so many things tied together in being you in that moment.
And can I just add too, not only are they being themselves, but they're working to be the best version of themselves. I was reading something recently about eagles, and I just love the idea of an eagle. And the mother eagle, at some point in the eaglet's life, it kicks the eaglet out of the nest. And so the mom's trying to encourage the eagle to fly, right? And so you might think, "Oh, that's so cruel. That's like, oh my gosh, if my mom kicked me out of the nest, I would feel some kind of way about that." But the truth is, the mom has a method to its madness. Like the mom eagle is saying, "Hey, I could let you die right here in this nest, or I can encourage you to be the best eagle possible by kicking you out of the nest, because I know if I keep doing it, you're going to be able to fly."
Well, so in the book, I gotta ask. So that analogy is a perfect, I think, transition to what do we do as educators to have that eagle moment, right? It's not about just keeping the eagle alive. It's about making the best version of that eagle. And part of that is through struggle. Part of that is through vulnerability. Part of that is pushing them out of that nest, out of their comfort zone, and not supporting or taking away the discomfort, but just giving them sort of the confidence, the tools. So what do you have to share with us about how to construct a classroom in which kids feel like you're going to push them out of the nest, but it's going to be okay?
Absolutely. And I'm so glad you asked that, because so inside of Journey to the YNU, chapter 2, it talks about a teaching philosophy that I have come to embrace. And it's along the acronym CLIMB, CLIMBE, climb, still talking about going up in the air. So that was a beautiful connection that you just made. And so the C The C in climb stands for cultivate. And so when I think about cultivate, I think about the ground. Before you put seeds in the ground, you cultivate the ground, you get it ready for the seed. And so maybe we're not talking about the physical ground, but we're talking about the heart or the mind of our students. How do you get the heart or the mind ready to learn? And so that cultivation process sometimes requires things being turned over. Like the soil has to be turned over for that seed, right? So that the seed can then be planted and produce something. And so maybe you have to see where your students are. That cultivation process requires a little bit of work, identifying who's in the room, right? And utilizing what you know about the ground, what you know about their minds, what you know about their hearts, and getting their hearts and their minds prepared for learning, prepared to receive the information of the new knowledge or the experience that you're about to introduce them to. Okay, so that's cultivate. The L stands for lead, giving students opportunities to develop leadership potential. I'm crazy enough to believe that our students are leaders. In some way, shape, or form, they have the propensity and the power to lead. And so sometimes they will, I realize that the students will lead if we let them, if we allow them the space and the opportunity. And so not only am I leading as the teacher in the classroom, but I am modeling what it means to lead so that hopefully I am an example for them to follow to develop that leadership potential as well. Inspire and motivate, they're like cousins, they're twins, because when I inspire means to turn on the light. Right, you're setting off those light bulbs in their minds, and sometimes that requires a good motivational speech. I can't tell you the number of times I've been in the classroom, Michael, where I will go off the script completely. And one of the things I say about lesson plans never go as planned. I say it all the time because it's true. There are moments that I will start talking about something, and it will be maybe semi-connected to what we're doing, but it turns into this moment of inspiration or this moment of motivation. And 30, 45 minutes later, I'm like, oh, we did not get everything done that I wanted to get done. But the truth is, we've gotten done more than I ever thought we would.
I think that's so true, right? Like, they shouldn't really be called lesson plans. It's like lesson hopes, lesson dreams.
That's a good word for it. I love it. But I mean, by leaps and bounds, the impact of that particular moment that you've taken to inspire your students is going to supersede what you might have planned in lesson plans, like you mentioned. So inspiration, motivation. The B is building character. So those things underneath that you don't get a chance to see, but they're often displayed outwardly. All right, that's what the B identifies. So looking for ways to work on the character of your students. Martin Luther King said it's not just about intelligence. It's about character. That's the true goal of education, intelligence plus character. And last but not least, the E, which I just absolutely love, thinking about the C, the L, the I, the M, and the B. The E, it looks like it's finality, but really the E can be happening throughout climb. It's not the ultimate place to be, but at the same time, it's like that mother eagle kicking the eaglet out of the nest so that the eagle knows that now you have the opportunity to take on the world. When you spread your wings and fly, it's not just about what's happening in the classroom at that present moment. It's about you taking those moments that we've had this year and using them for life.
That's beautiful. That's powerful. It's a powerful acronym. And I think as educators, it's one that we can really identify with. I liked how you said in the cultivating, we're doing actually some of the hardest work for what appears to be the littlest thing, right? We're turning over Mother Earth to put in the tiniest of seeds, right? But we know from that, like, is going to grow something important. And I think that extends straight to the lead, right? That, like, we're giving them a chance for leadership. We're giving them a chance to grow. And at first, that growth is small, and it, like, doesn't feel like a big leadership position. But for them, that's the first steps, right? When they just pop out of that earth, that cultivation. And then I think about inspire and motivate. This idea that they we're all leaders. I guess this is the concept I want us to get away from, this idea that a leader is like by title only. And they inspire other kids around them. We inspire other educators around us. We're all leaders. Somebody is looking up at you right now. And so you have the chance to inspire and motivate those around you. We as educators have this chance to inspire people in front of us. I loved your point about sort of giving an inspirational speech. I am right there with you, Dean. So much. I think we should take a little bit of the coach model, and give that pep talk occasionally, and then the idea of building as that like plant grows, and we want to strengthen that stem. And I think of that in power, to continue that analogy, is that moment, right? That the flower, when sun's at high noon and the flower just completely opens up because it's proud of who it is. It's got that strong base. It's confident, and it's just going to soak up all that sun and lead others around it to be like, I'm going to do that.
Yes, Michael. And so something else that came to mind, and I should have mentioned it before, but not only are you taking in all that sun, you're going to produce, if you're a fruit bearing plant, you're going to produce fruit, right? Or you're going to produce the ability for other plants to grow by nature of your seeds that you're going to produce in that flower. So it's a cyclical process. As you climb, others are able to climb.
Well, and you like impact the world around you. Like even the flower, like opening up that flower is a beautiful thing for the community to see, for people around you, when that flower is who it's supposed to be.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
It's
Absolutely.
nice. It's good stuff. I'm telling you, people. Dean, like I said, I'm so glad you're here. All right. So we're going to take that climb, and now we really want to empower students. And I know that another piece of your work, another thing that's you're passionate to build those bridges for us on, is giving the students that sort of confidence, that agency to have the student-driven classroom. So can you talk to us a little bit about that and where that started, where we can go with that?
Well, first of all, let me kind of a little bit of a caveat, because I know we've heard terms like student-centered classroom, and of course we've heard student-driven classroom, but I'd like to think of every classroom as a classroom that's supposed to be student-centered. If we have students in our classrooms, that classroom should be student-centered, without a doubt. Okay. However, I'd like to think of the student-driven classroom as an opportunity, because I think those are two totally different things. While I might be focused completely on students, am I giving them the opportunities to self-develop or become more than just what I'm teaching them as far as the curriculum? It's so much bigger than the science, the language arts, the social studies. It's so much bigger than that. It's really identifying the whole child. I am not in part. I'm whole. I'm a whole person. I have social, emotional going on. I have my mentality. I have my intellect. I have all these things about me that I bring to the table. And so when you consider the whole child, you are enabling them to see where they are, where they fit, letting them test the waters, letting them figure out, well, oh, I can do that, or perhaps I can do that, or perhaps this is where I fit. And so the student-driven classroom mindset identifies every aspect of that child and how that child kind of dictates or identifies where I go or how I construct or how I manage the classroom as the teacher. One of the things I have done, just as a practical example of the student-driven classroom, is allowing some of the leadership in the classroom to not be assumed by me. And early on, it kind of happened, I won't say by accident, but it was something that I didn't anticipate. One of the things I like doing on a daily basis is a quote of the day. Okay?
Me too.
And so, yeah, so R.J. Palacio's 365 Days of Wonder is what I had been using. And so she identifies a quote a day for the entire year. And started it out introducing the quote, allowing for discussion to happen in the classroom, facilitating that conversation, and encouraging students to kind of, voice their opinions. At the same time, I'm modeling what it means to listen, because when they talk, I'm listening. I model what it means to speak. So when I'm speaking, I encourage others to listen. And then, for example, when the students voice their opinions, they don't always agree. So I'm always teaching them, well, it's okay to not agree with someone, but at the same time, how do how do you respectfully disagree? How do you say, well, I like what you said there, but I don't agree with that part. What I think is such and such. So this was an opportunity to engage the classroom in community, building community in this moment, because you're hearing what others are saying and you're adding on to it. Even in your disagreement, you're saying this in a respectful way and you're adding on what you actually believe. Now, what did that turn into? It turned into a leadership opportunity. Why? Because I started out facilitating that conversation, reading the quote and allowing the students to be able to talk about it, until one day, seemingly out of the blue, one student came up to me and said, Mr. Gainey, can I start to do the quote of the day? I want to read it. I want to read the quote. And I was like, oh, okay, sure, absolutely. And so that little nugget or that little opportunity right there turned into the students completely taking over the quote of the day. And so now what does it look like? The student standing in front of the classroom, the student is identifying the quote, the student is interacting with his or her peers. There's a way, hey, I have something to say, I'm going to raise my hand. And so the student identifies that person, that particular student talks. Now, mind you, I'm still there. I'm just sitting back though, right? And I'm listening. I'm modeling what it means to listen. I am interjecting every now and again when the conversation goes dead or whatever, when the conversation gets a little, quiet, I might interject. But students are now empowered to lead, okay? Not only that, to hear the stuff that comes out of their mouths has blown my mind. And I'm talking about as low as third grade. I've taught third grade and above. So third graders are rising to the occasion and saying things that are just absolutely profound, things I can't even recall because it was just so in the moment. And so that's a wonderful opportunity that has really blown my mind. But guess what, Michael? It didn't stop there. Not only were students volunteering to facilitate the quote of the day conversations, not only were there other students engaged and participating, that led to students creating their own quotes. And I could still see my wall in the classroom because I would type them up. I would have them write it down. I would type it up and display it on the wall. And if you can imagine a mural of quotes across the wall of my classroom and letting the students see what they have come up with, other students seeing what their peers have come up with, mural on the wall, so empowering. And parents talked about it. It became such a culture building opportunity in the classroom. The students came together and they developed those leadership skills.
I mean, a lot to unpack there, Dean. I think we definitely got Dean on some things he's pretty excited about. I like way at the beginning you talked about that difference between student-centered and then student-driven. And kind of when you lay it bare like that, student-centered is kind of a ridiculous comment, right? Like, why wouldn't you be like, what are you doing if you're not student-centered? It's supposed to be student-centered. So moving us to student-driven is interesting, right? Like that's where it's like, oh, okay, like now how can we hand those reins over? And it goes back to your climb, right? It's this idea of empowering them, inspiring them, building them up, but then ultimately like having them reflect over and understand who they are, who they aren't, right? Mm-hmm. So, and that doesn't mean like shy away from those things, but let them play in different spaces so that they learn like that's not me, that is me. This is something I'd like to be, or like you said, always in a state of becoming. But the ability to be the driver in all of that is a game-changing situation, right? It is the difference, student-centered versus student-driven, is the difference between sort of feeding a fish versus teaching to fish, right? I mean, that your world's different in terms of outcomes there. And as teachers, we're in an amazing time in education in which we are being told to sort of experiment in these ways, do these things. And it's so awesome that we have supportive communities that are willing to let us try education different, because I think we realize that difference between feeding a fish versus teaching a fish, and how transformative that can be.
Absolutely. And I would add another thing too. Let's not just talk about curriculum. Sometimes, we want students to display certain behaviors or character traits. And so let's say, for example, they do, or in some cases, maybe they don't show those behaviors that we want them to show. That then becomes an aspect of the student-driven classroom. We even allow the behavior moments to drive how we respond and how we engage with our students. Teachable moments, right? Don't allow that moment to slip away, but connect it for them. Like, for example, man, if I did that as an employee, connect it to life. Like, what implications might that have for you as an individual, right? So it's bigger than just that moment where you saw that behavior. It becomes a part of life, and they can sort of think about that, reflect on that, and then ultimately they're going to change the behavior if they realize that it really has a part to play in their lives.
So in your sort of student driven class, you had this idea of this quote of the day, which is just something that you had built into your class. I've built that into my class. But then there was this like natural moment where you just sort of passed the reins a little bit because of something that bubbled up, right? That a student had that sort of moment. Are there times where, since reflecting on that and realizing that power, did that give you pause to sort of think through other areas in which you could kind of give the reins over?
Absolutely. And so I think what happened is I allowed the opportunity for students to suggest more or ask more. And I love the idea of authenticity and organic. And so I don't necessarily want to drive the authenticity or drive those organic moments, but I think it said to me, look for those moments or look more for those kinds of opportunities to allow students to suggest or take over or facilitate, because you really want it to be about the students in the room at that time. And so maybe, one group of students will need one thing, but then the next group, they're going to need something totally different. So I don't want to get in the way of what they actually need. So it really has to come from them.
I like that idea of sort of phenomenon teaching, right? Like what bubbles up to the surface. Like it's a natural style of teaching in that they have these questions, let's seek these answers, right? As opposed to like, well, today's lesson is this. Now, obviously, there are some times where we need to sort of lay a foundation, lay a base of understanding to have meaningful conversations and discussions, but lay that base, but then also create some space for them to have those questions and then truly like dive down on those questions, not just be like, well, that's beyond the scope, that's beyond the scope, that's beyond the scope. Like let's actually like be more natural, like you said, organic, and let those conversations, let those inquisitive things happen in our classrooms. That's
Absolutely. Michael, so that takes us back to cultivate, because if you have truly cultivated the ground the right way or the environment the right way, then students are encouraged. Students feel free to be able to speak and say and suggest. They don't cower away from it if the ground is right, if the environment is right.
Yeah, I think we as educators should be really mindful of our role. I mean, we're talking about giving way to the students, but a big piece of that is nonverbals for us. I mean, like they have to feel comfortable. They have to feel like this is a real deal that you're handing this over. And they also ideally would have to believe that this is a lasting style. This isn't like a one-off day, like, hey, I'm doing a simulation today. Hey, I'm going to give you the reins today, but then I'm going to yank them back tomorrow. Like you really want to lay a safe space for them so that you can teach and embed those SEL skills along with your content and along with their interest and along with what they need. And like you said, class 1 might be different than class 2, but that is okay. our role isn't to sort of get everyone to sort of some arbitrary finish line. Our role is to sort of improve these students' lives in our class and
Yes.
beyond.
Yes. And I have a question I would pose. What would happen if you allowed your classroom to be so student driven that if somehow you were absent one day and the sub had nothing to do because the students knew exactly what needed to happen and they carried out the day all by themselves?
That's that I think is doable, and it's a powerful question, and it really does make us think through what are we doing in our classrooms.
Because if truly they're going to be leaders, if you're developing leaders in your classroom, we should start to see some of those things like that, things happening without you having to even identify it.
Well,
Without you,
I would also say if there was buy-in on the tasks and the things you're learning, right? If they're buy-in on the seeds that you're trying to sow, they should want to do it whether you're there or not, right? Because they feel it's meaningful work. It matters, right? Then it doesn't matter that I'm not there, because it's like, no, this work still needs to get done, not because of a grade, but because of a life, a goal, a desire.
yes, and because you presented learning to them as this thing I really want, I really desire, because you made it look so good. As a
Made it
leader
look
in the
so good.
classroom, you made learning so desirable for me that I want to do this regardless of who's standing in front of me.
And I think that goes right back to kind of knowing and understanding your why. I think if you can do that, and if you can give that kind of elevator pitch to your students of why this matters, a lot of this other stuff can fall in place. But if we kind of continue just to be like, well, I have students because they're in front of me, because they have to be in front of me, and I am the sixth grade world history teacher, and I'm just going to teach them sixth grade world history, and then they're going to leave. Such a missed opportunity there to really truly empower and embed, like we said, SEL skills in these students that would be far more lasting than whatever is just in my textbook.
Sure. Hmm.
Speaking of that, let's sort of talk a little bit about how we set up a community, celebrate sort of that diversity.
I think it's important, in terms of diversity, to really understand what diversity is. And I like to ask the question, well, what is diversity? Because I believe that depending on who you ask, everybody's going to have a slightly different definition. And to be honest with you, that could lend itself to diversity too. Their actual answer to what is diversity could be diversity. But I believe it's important to identify that, because then it allows that playing ground or that sandbox to be able to have continued conversation about it. I think it's important for our students to understand what diversity is too, and not only to understand what it is, but to understand why it's important. And so thinking about diversity, we have diversity of opinion, diversity of perspective, diversity of role that we play, diversity of places that we live, diversity of culture, diversity of the foods that we eat. There's so many different things to consider. When we think about our students in the classroom, no two students are alike.
Nope.
Every one of them are different. And so when we think about diversity, what's one thing that I can identify about each of my students that is authentically them? Yes, they might be all in third grade. Yes, they might be all in fourth grade. But can I identify one thing about each of my students that they bring to this table that they can own, that's authentically them? Can I do that? I should be able to do that as a teacher. I think it's important for us to know them. I need to know who is among me, right? Scan the room, identify who I am dealing with, because I can't truly have a student-driven classroom if I haven't identified that.
So I think I'm going to bring up a slide that Dene has sort of shared with me that I think really kind of hits to that, right? So you're really saying the first thing we need to do is look for it.
Yes. And so I have a lot of knowledge in my head, but I don't know everything. And I think we have to lean into our students and what they bring. They're going to teach you things that perhaps you never thought possible. Maybe they're going to have knowledge about something that you don't necessarily have knowledge about. And that's a learning opportunity for me. And I can't expect my students to learn if I'm not willing to learn myself.
Sure.
So I'm always listening. I'm always trying to figure out what my students are doing because it might be an opportunity for me to step my game up as a teacher. So definitely, it's important to look for it. The second thing is to lean into it. So I think we have to be intentional. Um, Not only are we going to diversify our experience by looking at it or looking for it, I think we have to take then what we have found once we look for it and lean into it. How can I learn from this? How can I attach value to this and become better as a teacher because of what I now know? Um, and I think we have to be intentional in that. So don't just look for it because it's on the slide and it looks really wonderful. So let me go and look for it. No, there, there has to be a purpose in it. Be purposeful and intentional, and let that be an opportunity that as a teacher, I have just stepped forward another step because I now know something I didn't know before, and I can apply this in my life in some kind of way.
What I really love is the sort of interconnectedness of your work, because this goes right back to what we were saying in the beginning, right? This idea that you are going to look for what's around you, including yourself, and you're going to be you're just looking. You're not judging. You're not categorizing. You're just they're there. We're seeing the diversity around us. And then I like the idea of leaning in, right? Like how you learn from something is by leaning into that experience. If we walk away from that experience, that means we're not processing it. That means we're not building off what that experience gave us. And so it really kind of goes right back to being present and being you and being vulnerable and then being reflective over that.
Absolutely, Michael. Absolutely. And so that last L, after you look for it, after you lean into it, the ultimate outcome, right? If we are doing the looking and the leaning, we should learn. Okay. And so I think that we have to identify that we've learned something by reflection. And so bringing us back to that reflection piece, I put cognitive dissonance theory there because Festinger has a theory back in 1957, and it's cognitive dissonance. And so it assumes that everybody, teachers included, students included, has some level of cognitive dissonance, or should I say a disconnect between, their attitude and their belief. And so when you are able to close that gap by learning something new, that lessens your cognitive dissonance. So it lessens the imbalance or the idea in your own mind that you don't understand something or something doesn't agree in your mind. So as you have experiences like this, the dissonance becomes less. And so I think we definitely have to look for those opportunities to look for those opportunities to learn from those opportunities, and then of course. Allow those opportunities to cement and lessen our dissonance.
I'm reminded too of the fact that I mentioned at the start being a philosophy major in college, and to be able to read some of these dense philosophy books where the concepts are so foreign to how you are structured religiously, how you're structured like emotionally or intellectually, because it's somebody else's idea in a world you do not see. Like, that's not my thing. You had to be okay with this cognitive dissonance. Like, there's no way you could finish reading the book and understand it if the entire time you're like, that's foreign to me, I don't like it, that's foreign to me, I don't like it. You almost have to set aside that and just lean into the dissonance. But then what happens over time is your brain doesn't see cognitive dissonance as like a threat anymore. And you're able to hold an idea that's somebody else's idea. You're able to explore that idea without judgment. And at the end, have like a reflective piece about it and decide what you're going to do with that. But it is all about that dissonance and realizing that just like any other muscle, any other skill, we can actually be okay sitting in that dissonance and learning from it.
For sure, for sure. And I think the more we see that we can lessen the cognitive dissonance, the more we realize the value of experiences.
Ooh.
Okay, which
Yeah.
takes us back to our quote: "You are the only you that will ever be. Your experience is your story. Your diversity."
It's so true. It's so true, Dean. We this has been a fantastic session. I hope that people really dig into this work and really think about who they are, and then the spaces they're creating for others to feel it is okay to be vulnerable and show up and be who they are.
That is certainly my hope as well, for sure, for sure.
Awesome. Everybody, I want to say, first of all, thank you, Dean, for coming on to the Hive Summit. This has been a Power Pack session, and I am super jazzed to have it be part of this community.
Definitely, it's an honor.
And everyone else, again, I want to thank you personally for being part of the Hive, taking time out of your busy lives to come here to sort of learn and listen and then hopefully reflect and put into action the things you hear here at the Hive Summit. As always, check that calendar, see if you can make some of the other events. Don't forget to continue to bring people to the Hive. Invite some of your colleagues, your friends. They can go to hivesummit.org and sign up and tweet out your experiences. This is an online conference, and one way that we sort of can collide and connect is by having moments where online we share these ideas, we share these powerful stories together. So that's important that we do that. And I look forward to seeing you guys out in the interwebs there on the Hive Summit hashtag. And I hope we have a good rest of our day, and take care.